and welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, the podcast where real C-suite leaders have real conversations about the real stuff that they've faced and what they have learned. Today's episode is with Brandy Young, the COO of Harmony Bank in Dallas, Texas. And this conversation with Brandy is absolutely delightful. I think you'll find her authenticity really refreshing as we talk about mistakes she's made and other leaders have made that really impacted people and culture, how they got through it and what they learned. So please enjoy this conversation with Brandy. Well, Brandy, welcome to the podcast. We're so glad to have you with us, and I'm so excited to share your experiences and your expertise with all of our listeners. Thanks for being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Meg. I appreciate it.
So, Brandy, you are currently the COO of Harmony Bank, and you've been in the banking industry for many years in very senior leadership positions and in a bunch of different banks. So, you've had kind of a incredible trajectory to your career. Can you give us a little bit of context about how you got into the role that you're in right now? What was the career path?
Oh, sure. Great question. I started out in banking almost by accident. I was pursuing my college degree, working as a waitress, and had a group of women who came in and waited on them. And one of them was the head of HR for a financial institution. And she dropped her card and said, if you'd like to come work at a bank, we're always looking for people who have great service. And I say bank, it was a credit union at the time. And I called her the following Monday and said, yes, I'm very interested. And sort of the rest is history from there. So I started out in banking at a credit union, working as a teller. And then over the next 20 years in banking, just really working my way up through progressive responsibility, sharpening my leadership skills, learning more about running and operating a bank. I've been on the operations side mostly, but I've also dipped my toe into marketing and other business areas while I've been in banking. And when I got to the point in my career where I knew that I wanted to be COO, and I just want to touch on that for a second, that it's so important to know what it is that you want. I made that goal very clear to my supervisor, my mentor, the people who have influence over my career. And my mentor gave me some game-changing advice at that time. He said, act like a COO before you get the title. And what he meant by that was solve problems like you're already the COO, make decisions like you are, lead like you are. And I did. I mean, I really started practicing that in my daily work. And then when the opportunity came, nobody was really surprised. They would look at it and say, I thought she was already the COO. So that advice changed the way I approached my career, and it worked. And it's the piece of advice that I would pass along to anyone else, right? First, know what you want, communicate what you want, and then start living and breathing that role, and you'll get there.
Nice. Yeah, I've talked with a lot of COOs, and I feel like it's one of the most difficult, complex, and least understood roles on any executive team, C-suite, right? Like it tends to be a catch-all, and you've got to be the kind of person that can do a whole lot of things, keep a lot of balls in the air. And I've had a lot of COOs who get into the role and then go, oh my gosh, all the problems are on me now. I have to make all the final decisions, right? So the fact that you really prepared and lived in the role and made sure like this is where I'm going, I want to be able to do this. That's very wise of you. So Brandy, you have gone into a lot of different settings that had different unique challenges in the culture. And, I love talking about the people side of things, which you do too. So can you talk about coming into, you don't have to name the company institution, but coming in and seeing some real distinct challenges or problems with culture, the way people were showing up that was affecting the business? What's a really hard challenge that you had to overcome, and how did you do it?
Sure. I mean, there's been several different situations. Like you mentioned, I've been at numerous different financial institutions, and all of them were at different stages. So when I started out as a teller and I moved up through that organization, when I first started, it was a handful of branches. And by the time I left there, we were a couple billion in assets and over 20 branches. So they went through incredible growth. Mm-hmm. And I would say probably the most challenging situation there was when I worked at that bank, it was acquired by another bank. And the people part of that was so impactful. And I will give incredible kudos to the organization that came in and did the acquisition and the company that I worked for, in that they worked very closely together and they were completely transparent with the team.
Okay.
And what I mean by transparent is they told us as soon as they could that there's going to be an acquisition. They were very clear about which organization was acquiring the other organization so that everybody just intuitively understood the lay of the land and the leadership that was going to happen. And then for positions that were open for people who could continue in their role, they were very early in the process to tell people that, hey, we want you to continue in the role that you're in. And they were equally great about telling people who didn't have a future with the organization that, hey, we've got another person that's already doing that. There's a duplication here. And long term, you're not going to be with the organization. And I was one of those people. And I could say that I felt completely treated with respect and dignity throughout the process. It was great. And because they were transparent, they told us, you know, this is how long we want you to stay because we want to have a successful transition. We're going to reward you for staying. And in the meantime, we know that it's important for you to have a plan for your future so you can seek out another position. And there didn't have to be any subversive activity going on or anything behind closed doors. You could say, hey, I'm leaving today to go to an interview. And that was accepted and understood. And so that was probably one of the most challenging situations. And being a leader in the organization at that time, even one that was leaving, it was great for me because I was able to communicate in a positive, transparent way with my team. I was able to let them know that I'm not going to be here, and I didn't have to put a face on things. I told them, you know, this has worked out really great and the company's treating me well. And I mean, it was a great experience, which I don't think a lot of people would say that, hey, being acquired and losing your job is a great experience. But it was. It's all about how you handle it. And if you treat people well and with dignity, I think you can accomplish even the most chaotic situation in a positive way.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, in my experience and looking at big changes that are going through companies, even just big growth or change in leadership, it's not so much what's happening, it's how it's happening. Right. Mm-hmm. And people can be very resilient if they have trust and faith that you care about them and that you're going to do the right thing for the business, even if it's a hard business decision and some people have to separate. I think people can respect that, but we mm-hmm. have so much fear around people's reactions. Sometimes in leadership roles, we hide information. We think that we're going to make things okay, but people can sniff that out. They want transparency. They want honesty.
Well, and people will, and it's human nature, people will go to a dark place or the worst thing when they lack information.
Right.
So like you said, you may think that you're protecting somebody or protecting an event or a scenario, but by not sharing the information openly, you're allowing people to just tell their own stories to themselves. Exactly. And many times those can be negative.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about a team where you came in and you really had to build a high-performing culture. And we all know culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And so mm-hmm. we've all got these big goals and KPIs and metrics and beautiful systems and processes. And then the unnecessary drama, people friction, just things that come up, disengagement, keeping secrets and information to ourselves, those kind of cultural challenges. Can you talk about a cultural challenge that you've experienced and had to overcome? What was it? What was your strategy?
So coming to work for a particular bank, I came in on the heels of an acquisition. That's actually happened to me a couple of times, like immediately on the heels of an acquisition. And I can tell you that when you come in on the heels of an acquisition, especially at an organization that hasn't done it yet, like this is their first time,
Mm-hmm.
it is chaotic and the disruption is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And in both of these instances, I came in where it didn't follow those best practices that I just talked about. There wasn't a lot of transparency. There wasn't a lot of communication. There wasn't even like a really good description of who's in charge and who's going to be making the leadership decisions. And that's incredibly difficult coming in on the heels of that. And so having done that at a couple of different organizations, I learned a lot at the first one. And at the first one, I came in right after they had completed an acquisition. There was so much disruption. And then we did several more acquisitions within the next 5 years, several. And the funny thing about it is, despite the disruption that they had, and they learned from what went wrong the first time.
Okay.
And even coming in like I did, I was able to learn what went wrong the first time. And the good thing that I was able to bring to the table is right after the acquisition, we were about to kick off a major project. We were converting our debit card brand provider, and we were issuing all new cards, and we were consolidating 3 different bank cards together into one with 3 different providers. It's a huge project. And I was able to get team members, and I had to get team members from each one of the separate entities
Mm-hmm.
to be on the team because I needed their expertise in order to make that a successful project. And I had run a project like that before, so I had experience. I knew what the process and methodology was. Our vendor that we were moving to had a great project management process that we were able to follow. And by bringing in these people from the different entities and having them work together and having respect for the experience, expertise, knowledge of each one of those individuals and allowing them to contribute to something in a positive way where they felt like, okay, I'm part of a team that helped deliver something that was amazing, I think really was a turning point for them because people want to do a great job. They want to add value. And where you have disruption or it hurts the culture is if they think nobody sees my value. Why am I working here?
Yeah.
And if you're contributing and you know somebody sees it, you recognize it, and you can point to something and say, I did that, I was part of that, then that's a game changer for your culture. And I mean, we got to the point where our acquisitions, the team that worked on it, we thrived on it. We had a culture of trust, competency, shared success. Everybody knew their role, everyone pulled their weight. And we just enjoyed the challenge of it to the point where if we decided that we were going to do another acquisition, everybody just jumped on the due diligence. Wow, we can't wait. We can't wait to repeat what it has been very successful for us.
Awesome.
And I mean, that's the power of culture. An acquisition that looks great on paper will fail spectacularly if the team isn't prepared for it. And so, you know, people may not have heard that phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast, but I mean, that's an example of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, you have also had to watch these frankly kind of bad decisions being made about how to navigate acquisitions and change and develop high performing teams, going from good to great, or even just from okay to good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and leadership is the key, right? It's our skill and how we're communicating and making these decisions. So, um, I have found that I learned a lot about how I didn't want to lead from people who had led me. So,
Mm-hmm.
or just watching the behaviors of other leaders. So, can you give me an example of what you've learned from a bad leader that you've had, a bad boss, or even just watching someone who maybe wasn't your boss? And what are the behaviors or traits that you think you've learned from and are showing up kind of the opposite of what you experienced?
Yeah. I mean, it sort of even goes back to this experience, but to me, in my mind, a bad boss is somebody that hires great people and then doesn't let them do their job.
Okay.
And that can take a lot of forms, Meg. That might be micromanaging, it might be lack of trust, playing favorites, not supporting the team, being out of sync with other leaders to where there's misalignment at the leadership level, any one of those things. But at the end of the day, how it displays itself is somebody's not able to do the job that they were hired to do. And bad bosses, 100% they can change. If people couldn't change and bosses couldn't change, no company would be successful because you're not birthed as a successful leader, right? It takes real work. So they can change, but only if they want to, right? So somebody has to recognize that and be self-aware and realize, hey, I'm not the best at that. Maybe I'm bad at it. Maybe I'm not the best. Maybe I played favorites and that created some downstream issues with my team. Or maybe I micromanage that particular function because it's really important to me. Mm-hmm. And I need to stop doing that so I can let the people do their job and do what they do well. But if you're self-aware and you know that and you want to change, then yes, you absolutely can.
Yeah, absolutely. So the old saying of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And part of our role and our skill set, frankly, as a boss, is to create other good leaders, other good bosses, mm-hmm. and coach them and make them want to get better at what they're doing. I know you do a lot of that, of coaching of other mm-hmm. leaders and helping them to gain that awareness and then have the motivation and desire to make hard changes, because no one wants to be a bad boss. We've got those behaviors for a reason, right? And they're bad habits that we need to get called out on and supported through. So what are ways that you have, like, can you give us some examples of bad boss behaviors that you have worked with someone on and helped them to shift out of? How did you do that? What was your coaching strategy?
One of the bosses that I've worked for has been very, I said transparency was important, mm-hmm. but radical transparency can be used like a club in certain instances. And so I worked for somebody who wanted to have a good relationship with the team, who really saw that we were disjointed and needed to bring the direct reports together. And there was a lot of contention and strife in the workplace. And this manager would just respond to situations by just being like really blunt, like, this is the situation and, you just have to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And the approach, while it may have seemed like, well, I'm just being honest, I'm just being transparent with people about how it is, the delivery of the message is so important as well. And so what I would do is, if I knew we had a situation where we were going to be having difficult conversations, mm-hmm. I would go in and have the conversation with this leader in advance.
Okay.
To say, hey, we're meeting with this person today or this group today. This is likely to be a topic that comes up. How do we want to address that? And we would just talk through it. And by doing that, I think we were able to get the emotional reaction out of the way, mm-hmm. and focus on, well, how can we refine the message where we are being transparent, we're being direct, but we're doing it in a way that message can be received.
Brilliant. So not only did you because I found a lot of bad boss behaviors are when people get emotional, they have that threat response, right? And then they just, mm-hmm. that's when we all do stupid things.
We all do.
Right? So letting them to have that reaction in a safe space with you, mm-hmm. get over it. But then another brilliant thing that you did is you put it back in their lap and said, what do you think? So that you're asking them to step up and be really intentional rather than reactive, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really how we build the skill over time is, wait a second, that's a good question Brandy's asking me. Like, we do need to be careful about this. What does that mean? What could that look like? Then their wheels are turning and they're learning.
Right. They're leadership muscles and they have to be worked and exercised. Like I said, you're not first as a great leader. You also can't deal with an adverse situation one time and think, well, I've got that. I know how to deal with that every time from now on. having every difficult conversation that you have to have builds that muscle. Every adverse situation that you're dealing with and thinking through that as a leader, and realizing, okay, here's something that I could have done different or better is a learning opportunity, but you're exercising that and growing that. And so that's why I'm a strong believer that you will never be the perfect leader.
No.
We're in this state of continuous learning, continuous development. So you can never say, I've reached the pinnacle. I'm the best leader that there is. There's no way that I can improve on this version of myself. You always can. You have to have that state of being willing to learn and grow and develop no matter where you are in your career.
Yeah. If anyone ever came and said, I don't need to develop myself as a leader, I'm at the pinnacle, I would run the other way. That is someone you definitely do not want to work with.
Right. Professional athletes need a coach.
And they spend the most money and time on the best coaches, right? Yeah. So, a lot of the insight and wisdom that we've gained is from the mistakes we've made. And you're a great coach to other people, but can you give us an example too of when you may have been your own worst enemy, looking back in hindsight, right? Where you realized you were doing something that just wasn't effective. You were really in a battle with yourself more than anything. What was that old mindset approach that you were using? What did you learn and carry forward from that experience?
I'm going to use something that was a fairly recent experience. And it's one of those things where I look back on my behavior and cringe and realize that I certainly could have handled that situation better. And yes, learn from that. And it's like a small thing, but it's the collection of all these small things that make us who we are, May. I had an employee who worked for me who I sent to a executive presence workshop.
Okay.
And during that workshop, and I had been through the workshop, so I knew essentially what she was going to be doing. And day one, they have you get up and speak on a topic for a couple of minutes, record you on your own mobile phone, and then you go home that evening and you look at the video and you assess yourself. That's the beginning. And then over the next couple of days, they give you tactics to, first you identify that self-awareness again, right? First you identify what it is that you need to work on individually. And then you take their tactics and you employ those so that you can do better. And at the end of this workshop, we had gone to dinner as a team. So it was this individual plus a couple of other team members, and we were all sitting around a round table at a restaurant. And actually 2 people had gone to this workshop. And I asked them, how was the workshop? What do you think you got out of it? And the great thing was, is I saw her put into practice everything that she had learned over the last couple of days. She actually took a scenario at work and presented the information to me and used the leadership and speaking tactics that she had learned. And I immediately, and she asked me, well, what do you think when she got done? And I immediately gave her, here's what I think that you did really well, and here's what you could have improved on. And I could just see the energy just completely fall with her. And I mean, you could look at that from the outside and say, well, she asked for your opinion, but I didn't recognize her emotional state at that time. Mm-hmm. She was on a high. Like I went through this workshop. I learned something new and great. I demonstrated it in front of my manager, and I really care about her opinion. That was the time for me to say, this is fantastic. I see that you put it to work. Here's what you did that's really great. Congratulations. It's a good job. I think this was time well spent. And then after the emotion had settled, that would be the time to go back and say, hey, want to follow up with you on this. Here's some things, again, that I thought that were great. And here's some things that I think that you could continue to improve on or develop, right? And not understanding the emotional state of the person that I was communicating with really struck me. Like I had a moment where I could really lift her up and celebrate a success with her and diminish that.
Yeah, it's you're being a little hard on yourself, Brandy, but that's a lot of the miscommunications and when we erode trust, frankly, is when we're not being sensitive and aware to the emotional state of the other person and we don't have good timing or delivery, right?
Right.
It's again, it's not what you said, it's when, how, right? Like I was
All of those things factor in.
yeah. Yeah, and a lesson I learned the hard way is never give feedback to someone in front of anyone else. It's got to be private if it's negative feedback, right? If it's, hey, you could
Right.
work on this, it's do it privately and try and make them want it first, right? Like, hey, I know you care about X, so I want to tell you something that might help you with X. And that's just that next level skill that you get by making 150 mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some people it's much harder for us to be attuned to what their emotional state is than others,
Mm-hmm.
and some people are trickier to read.
Yeah.
So give yourself a little break, but that's a great lesson, right? It's a great
It was a good
takeaway is pay
lesson.
attention to what's going on with other people in a way that's kind of intense, like be extremely perceptive. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to do. So, so Brandy, I love to ask this closing question. I think you're going to have a good response for this. If you could go back and talk with you 10 to 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
what is some advice that you would give yourself that you really think you needed and you wish you could go back in time and give the you 10 or 15 years ago?
I think it really goes back to the question that you asked about how I got to the C-suite. And I was on the right track 10 years ago. I really had been working and growing and developing, but I wasn't crystal clear about what I wanted my next step to be. And Oprah said this one time when she was on, I don't know, a talk show, and the host asked her, "What's your secret to success?" And I remember her saying that because she's wildly successful, right? And she said, "You have to know what you want," which sounds really easy, but it's not. Like
No.
you really have to know what you want. And then once you know what you want, you communicate that out.
Mhm.
And then everything that you do works towards what you want. The people who have an influence in your life work towards that as well. And everything rises up for you to be able to accomplish and make that happen. And I wish I had taken that stance much earlier in my career to understand that you need to have that clarity about what it is that you want, and then don't be afraid to talk about it
Yeah.
to people. Like you can't say, "Well, I told the hiring manager 5 years ago when I was hired that I was interested in going to the next level of my career." Okay, well, that's probably not top on their hit list, of what they're thinking about every day when they come to work. And it's top of mind for you. So you're thinking about it and you're thinking they didn't deliver on that promise. They told me they would help me with that. So you've got to communicate about it. There's nothing wrong with that. To share your desire, your professional development, where you want to go. And that can help the people that you're working for respond and say, "Is that a path for you here?"
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
invite those conversations, and then you can make a plan and you can make things happen. So I would have liked to have had that sort of advice 10 years ago.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So, what do you feel like, though? I'm going to quick follow-up question. What do you feel like held you back from having that clear vision, being able to know it and go after it?
Well, 10 years ago, as much information wasn't available as it is now. And you talked about people that get into the COO role and how it encompasses so many things that maybe you weren't aware of. And so there were certain things about the role to me that were a black box. Like, what does it take to get there? Like,
Okay.
what is that? What are the skills? What are the knowledge other than just working for a long time in operations? How do you make that final step? And there's so much information available now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So AI is a perfect example. You could go out there, Meg, and you could say, "I want to be a COO of a community bank that's 2 billion in assets. Give me a 6-month plan with specific resources and milestones to learn how to run that bank within the next 6 months.
Wow.
And it's going to, in a matter of seconds, give you a 6-month plan of the different things that you need to know and learn, and resources that you can go to learn how to become COO of a community bank that's $2 billion in assets. That is very different than the landscape 10 years ago or 5 years ago or even a couple of years ago. And the other thing that I would say is get a mentor, and not just one, get mentors. Have somebody who's a peer that you coach one another. Get somebody who's been there in your industry. Get somebody who's been there in a different industry. And be open to that coaching and what they have to say, and be a sponge.
Awesome. Awesome. Brandy, well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing all these experiences in a very authentic way. It's been a total pleasure. Thank you.
It was great. Thank you, Meg.